She has gone skydiving in New Zealand and Vancouver. When you think about it, it's probably about the same latitude, right? Probably very similar geological features, I'm hoping. Same air, you're flying through the same air, right? All right, everyone please welcome Merav.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Merav Yuravlivker. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Data Society. I think my talk is a little bit the opposite of Tommy. I have like zero math, not technical. So we're finishing out the day with talking about data, which is really what this conference is about. So in order for you to know where I'm coming from, let me just give you a bit of a background. Data Society is a company I helped start back in 2014. In a nutshell, we help professionals use data better. We deliver custom data science training programs to large organizations, Fortune 500 companies, and other large organizations. And we also do some consulting projects as well, kind of come out of that, mostly to do with building software predictive algorithms. But the reason we really got started is because back in 2014, I did not know data science. I am actually an educator at heart. I started my career in New York City public schools teaching elementary special education. Still the hardest job I've ever had. And so I was really good at education and I used data to inform the decisions that I was making. But as I was trying to learn more, I couldn't really find anything that spoke to me as a professional. So serendipity happened. I met with a few friends and we all saw the same problem in different fields and decided, hey, if we can't find it, let's build it. And so we ended up building those types of solutions. And we're still here 8 years later, so we must be doing something right. For today, as a teacher, I always like to put my objectives up for anybody who knows, and I need to remember what they are, so I'm going to look up. We're going to talk a little bit about professionals and some of the challenges that they're still facing today, some of the trends that have changed from 2018 to now, and then some of the things that you can do to help increase being data-driven within your organization. So I know I'm not allowed to take questions from you, but that doesn't stop me from asking you questions. So just out of curiosity, how many of you work with data today? That's like almost everyone. How many of you have colleagues or a manager that don't really know what you do? Okay, also a lot of people, right? So this is something that we actually found to be a really big challenge because the lame joke that I like to say is if a data scientist finds an insight but nobody around her understands it, does it matter, right? And so what we see all the time is you have these really amazing data professionals who want to have an impact, but they can't convey it appropriately because people don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're saying. They don't have the right resources. And so what we've really found is that it's actually a communication gap. There's no common data vocabulary. And that's really one of the big challenges that we solve. And why is it so important? It's because without having data literacy, your organization, your company, they're going to fall behind, right? There's a lot of data out there. They need to be able to use that effectively. And I like to show these types of statistics to the executive audiences that I present to, the people who don't use data on a regular basis, because I want them to understand exactly how important it is. I would say most industries today are still not using data the way that they need to be using it. And it's not because of anybody in this room. You all are doing a great job. It's because everybody else is still having difficulty understanding what that really means. Okay, and these are some numbers I think back from 2020. I would say they're still true today, if not more. A lot of people still feel really overwhelmed with data. We talk to a lot of folks who are like buried in Excel spreadsheets or doing SQL queries all the time because their colleagues don't know how to do them. I see some heads that are nodding, right? They're asked to build these Tableau dashboards to look at one metric that like nobody ever needs to look at again. So we're seeing a lot of wasted time, a lot of wasted energy because people are not able to communicate. And we see what the impact can have here. Advanced organizations are more than 20%, what did I write up here? More profitable, right? And so think about these numbers, and I will tell you how you can leverage this later in the talk. So with that, let's turn back time a little bit to 2018. 2018, Black Panther came out. People were eating Tide Pods. Do you guys remember this? I didn't understand what this was, but it was a thing. It was a thing. Now people are doing other things like drinking bleach. I don't know. It's the whole thing. And then like Beyonce absolutely crushed it at Coachella. K-pop also became a lot bigger. Harry married Meghan. Do you guys remember that when they were still royal? Yeah, that was like a big deal. And so a lot has changed. And what we were seeing in terms of data trends, right? So first off, there was a lot of data pipelines that were being built, a lot of focus on that. There's also a lot of advances in NLP, like obviously Tommy is continuing that trend in 2022. And what we were also seeing is that there was an increased demand on model interpretation. And back in 2018, we were seeing these communication issues. So we decided to do a survey. So we released a survey. It was like, I just put basically a blog post on Medium. I created a survey that was, I don't know, maybe 15 questions or something like that. That was about the plight of the frustrated data scientist, right? Because we kept hearing this story again and again. And here were the results that we saw. So back in 2018, we saw that leadership and other non-data people didn't really understand what data was. 30% of data professionals' times were spent on explaining what they do to others. Does this resonate with anyone here? Again, seeing some heads nod. And magic. Did you guys know magic existed? It does in data, apparently, because everyone thinks that it is magic to do data science, right? Managers, people who didn't have an understanding of that. And so that was a really big pain point. And so from that, we said, okay, well, how can we empower data professionals to overcome this challenge? So we created a toolkit back then. And what it was is it essentially was a presentation that combined all of these different myths and tried to dispel them in a presentation, 20 to 30-minute talk that anybody could download and put on, had a script, had slides, and had everything else. We got a really positive feedback. And then, we went back to regular life. People would keep downloading it. Sometimes I'd get, emails saying, hey, this was really helpful. And fast forward to 2022, again, a lot of things have changed, right? We got COVID. We started to see data needs to be everywhere. Big focus on data literacy. How many of you all have heard data literacy before? How many of you all have organizations that are like, we're going to be data literate within the next 5 years? We're going to do it. We have a few people who are like that. Okay, maybe not. Maybe you want them to be. I don't know. And we decided to rerun the survey because we said, well, it's been a couple of years. What's changed? The answer is sadly, shockingly little. I wish the results were different. Keep in mind that the sizes are quite different. So I actually put the survey link on one of the first pages. Please take it so that we can get your feedback and your input and we can incorporate that in here. There just are not that many big differences, right? So when we ask the question, what do you want your manager, your leadership to know? In 2018, it was what data science can and cannot do. And now in 2022, it's really focused more on how data science can impact the company, but they just switched. There's not actually a huge difference. So it sounds like 4 people kind of understand that data is important, but don't really understand what to do with it, right? One of the things that, again, is very similar when we ask this question, do you think your organization is using data effectively? 2/3 of respondents said no. Just a show of hands, how many of you resonate with the 2/3 of respondents that we got here? A lot. Okay, take the survey so we can get those responses. So we're still seeing this, even though I'm sure you've seen over the past 4 years, data, everybody's talking about data. Everybody says that they're using data. Everybody's saying that they're using AI, right? But are they really? That's the question that we were trying to answer. So some other trends that we were seeing, what are some of the biggest changes? We're seeing a lot more people are hiring for data related roles. There's more training opportunities involved. Pretty sure that's why we're still around. And then some of the biggest challenges, production. So we got a lot of comments about putting work into scalable production, which we did not see in 2018. So that was actually one of the bigger changes that we saw. People really want to get production code up and running, right? We're seeing a lot of platforms that are really coming to the forefront to empower that. Getting access to the data that I need. So, this is for government conference. We do work with a lot of government agencies. One of the things we see most often when we run some of our programs is that our students can't access the data sets that they need to do the analysis that they want to do. Sometimes it's for a good reason. If we're dealing with data that has, HIPAA or personal information, obviously there need to be protocols in place, but equally, people are being prevented from doing good work because they don't have access to their data. And so again, these are some of the challenges that we see every day that we're working with to overcome. Something else that I thought was interesting, misconceptions. How easy it is to gather data. Have you heard this before? Have you folks heard this? Like, you're talking to a manager about a project and it takes you 3 to 4 weeks to even find the data set and make sure that the data is okay. And then your manager's like, oh, that should have taken like a couple hours, right? No, we all know how hard it is in this room to collect data. Machine learning still does magic, apparently. And this is an interesting comment that I saw a few of. Data science can do anything because Google does anything. Google can do anything, and therefore we as an organization can do anything that Google does. Okay, again, do they have the infrastructure in place, right? So we're seeing a lot of these challenges that still exist. And we're doing a revamp for our toolkit, but what I want to do today in the last 8.5 minutes that I have with you is talk a little bit about what you can do in order to go back to your office, to your team, to your organization, and start to break down some of those barriers that we see. So what does it really mean to be data-driven? So we created these 2 axes. This might be familiar to you, maybe you've seen this before, about what it means in practice to be data-driven. So we have data literacy and we also have data infrastructure. And as we can see, all the way up there in the top right, you're data-driven. If you have solid data infrastructure, people on your team understand what data is, they understand how to ask the right questions. Awesome, you're there. Feel free to close your eyes and just try not to snore for the rest of this talk, okay? Otherwise, you might have some work to do, and we actually have a questionnaire. I think it's 10 or 20 questions that can actually help you identify where you are. Now, what's really interesting, and this is what we do with a lot of folks, is that different teams and different levels have different responses. So some people think, of course we're data-driven. I have access to all the data that I need, right? I have access to the infrastructure. I can access Posit or Python. And others say, no, I have no access to the data. I have no idea what my other team members are doing. And so a lot of times these answers are different and can be very segmented. So let's look at the first axis, which is data infrastructure. Again, as you're talking about this with your colleagues or as you're thinking about this for yourself, kind of ask yourself these questions. You have data collection, you have data storage, and you also have data security, right? So these are the 3 pillars of data infrastructure. And this can mean different things to different organizations, right? If you're a healthcare organization, obviously data security means something completely different than if you're not, right? And you also have to think about data storage. How is it backed up? A lot of things are in the cloud now. I don't think I know many folks that still do anything on-prem, but how is that backed up, right? How is that backed up? How is that accessible? So these are a few things that are concrete pillars that you can go to your leadership with, or if you are leadership, you can go to your colleagues with to talk about, like, where are we on these things? What do we have? On the other axis, we have data literature, data literacy, excuse me. So again, we have these 3 pillars here. First one is data leadership. One of the biggest factors that we found to be either success or not success when it comes to implementing a larger data-driven policy is your leadership bought in? Can they allocate the resources? Can they allocate the time? Do they understand what it means to be data-driven? Make sure your leadership is on board. Data governance is another big thing. How many of your organizations have data governance, have talked about data governance, or implementing data governance? A few. Oh, I would get on that. I think that's a really important component because data governance essentially outlines the guidelines for how to use data responsibly. For example, there's a ton of dark data that exists because people have a bunch of those Excel spreadsheets downloaded to their computer and not anywhere else, right? So what happens when they leave and their laptop gets wiped? All of that data goes down the drain. these simple guidelines of where to store your data, how to label your columns, how to handle data appropriately, minor guidelines that make a really, really big difference. And last but not least, data knowledge. Does your staff understand how to ask the right questions of data? One of the biggest things that we see, if you're a data professional, is they get a lot of queries from their colleagues about SQL queries, about questions that are business related, but they're not really expanding on what they really need. And so there are, again, these miscommunications. If your colleagues around you understand how to use data, how to ask questions, they feel empowered, they can actually do some of that work themselves. And then that leaves you to really dig into more in-depth, algorithms and modeling and things like that. Okay. I have 4 minutes left. I think we're good, actually. How can you encourage data-driven thinking? So we've been doing this for over 8 years. We've seen a lot of ways for this to be implemented successfully. And it starts with you all who are in the room. So the first thing that we like to say is to be the role model yourselves. Sometimes that sounds really daunting, but you can take one step at a time. So what does that really look like in practice, right? If you are running a project or you have colleagues that are doing an analysis, ask for those metrics and show them what you mean. If you have a prototype there, you can also ask questions about the data, dig into it. Do people account for those biases? Where is the data coming from? Are those models valid? Have they been tested with real world data? Use tools and exercises to get people out of the box. Demonstrate your decision-making during meetings. So especially if you're, again, in that leadership, like literally point to the chart that you are using to inform your decision, right? Be very deliberate about that and start to show people what that means to be data-driven, and engage in creative thinking to drive innovation. So one of the events that we love to see are hackathons or lunch and learns. And I think I'm eating into my next slide, maybe a little bit. So find ways to showcase the good work that people are doing. At the same time, provide people a safe space. One of the things that we see most often is people are afraid to fail. They're like, I'm going to do this model, and if it doesn't turn out exactly right, I'm not going to be allowed to do anything else. I think everyone in this room understands the first time you run a model, it's not going to be perfect, right? We have to iterate. Sometimes we need to go back and get more data, or we need to redefine the question itself. Be a safe space for other people. Let people explore their ideas, help them talk it through, and provide them a place to fail, because that's how they learn from it, right? And that's the best way to do any of these projects, in my opinion, is to be able to really learn from our mistakes. And if you provide that safe space, people are more likely to take that risk themselves. So that's really important to do as well. And last but not least is give recognition. People love to be recognized. And one of the biggest drivers that we've seen to help inspire others is showing successful projects within an organization. So let's say you're on a team that did great work. Maybe they implemented a model, they were able to automate some processes. Put on a lunch and learn, put it in a newsletter, do a hackathon around the next stage of it, shout it from the rooftops, because other teams will see that and they'll say, oh, you did this within the restrictions that we have on our networks. You did this within our organization's mission. And I actually think I have a similar problem that we can solve, right? And it's really fun for the people who are doing the hard work, frankly. It's important to give recognition when that good work is done, and also when there are improvements that need to be made. So this was a very quick talk. I have 1 minute left, so I think I did really well on timing. But hopefully you're able to take away some of these action items, maybe pick one that you think is that low-hanging fruit that you can go back to your team with next week and just say, hey, let's start using charts. Let's start using the dashboards that we've created to actually drive some of those decisions that we're discussing. With that, I'm going to finish out my talk. Just to say, if you want to learn more about us, you can go to Data Society. You can also just email me. I didn't include my last name because nobody would ever email me correctly. So it's just Merav@datasociety.com. All right, thank you all so much.